Dan Carden.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move that leave be given to bring in a bill to provide for a right for a user of health and care services to be accompanied by a care supporter and for connected purposes. The care of a loved one is not an optional extra. It is an absolutely central part of dignified care. Separation and isolation have a deeply harmful impact on individuals, but particularly on those who are vulnerable. And for those who are approaching the end of life, the impact cannot be understated. My bill seeks to recognise these fundamental points and put them into law. Throughout the pandemic, guidance proved consistently inadequate. It applied with levels of uncertainty and variability that led to a postcode lottery as separate settings interpreted guidance differently. There is also a clear lack of recourse when guidance is applied incorrectly, as well as a wide power imbalance between service users and care providers. These problems will not be solved through further tweaks to guidance. Past practice has shown this. Older and disabled people, those affected by dementia, stroke and other cognitive impairments, those with a mental or physical disability, these are some of the most powerless people in our society. They often do not have the ability to challenge decisions made at care homes or hospitals. And in the worst, but not uncommon circumstances, they are unable to defend themselves against abuse, neglect, or inhumane conditions. The devastating impact of all of this does not only affect those in receipt of care, but also their loved ones. Further, poor quality data on visiting means we cannot appreciate the true scale of the problem. Data doesn't capture where visits are only allowed for a short period of time, where young people are disallowed from visiting, or where people cannot see parents, husbands or wives directly in their rooms. But there is also a principle at stake. Do we as society give the right to institutions of the state or private, namely hospitals or care homes, to deny us contact with family and loved ones because they are in receipt of their care? Or do we believe we should keep our right to maintain contact with loved ones, regardless of health or care needs? I think it's obvious. I firmly believe we should make a clear choice for the latter and enshrine that right in law in this House. There is a dangerous hangover from COVID of restrictions and a lack of urgency from government to change things. It means the need for this bill is as pivotal as it was during the pandemic. Let me now turn to the steps I've already taken to put this right into law. But before I do that, I want to pay tribute to the determined efforts of campaigning organisations in this area, in particular Rights for Residents campaign group and the Relatives and Residents Association, who have now merged to become Care Rights UK and John's campaign. The work of Jenny Morrison, Diane Mayhew, Helen Wildbohr, Julia Jones, Nikki Gerard and Kate Meacock has been absolutely inspirational, and they are all in the public gallery today watching our proceedings. I also wish to place on record my appreciation to the members for Chatham and Aylesford, St Albans and Dyfel Merioneth, who have supported this campaign from its origin. Quite simply, I wouldn't be introducing this bill if it was not for their collective efforts, and I thank them all for this. In November 2021, I tabled an amendment to the Health and Care Bill that aimed to guarantee visiting rights to hospitals and care homes. These amendments weren't moved, but I hoped the Department would take note. Many people across the country spent that winter of 2021 separated from those most important to them. In March 2022, we invited those affected to an event where they could share their experience with parliamentarians. The testimonies that we heard were harrowing, and the collective trauma was palpable. That powerful event left those present united in the view that a legal right was needed to secure the right of care users to nominate an individual to provide support or care in all circumstances. Many of us at that event were disappointed by the following inaction from government. Nonetheless, following the event, 60 members signed a letter to the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove, who at that point was Secretary of State for Health and Social Care, pushing for a legal right to be put into law. We were again left disheartened by the Department's response, which prescribed updated guidance as the solution to any problems. However, we pressed on, and in October last year, responding to our backbench debate, the current Minister for Care stated that she did not consider the status quo acceptable and that she was on the case. These words meant a lot to those affected. The promise of action. Campaign groups waited to see what shape this promised action would take. And I trust the Minister of Care has been working on this issue. And she attended our meeting this morning to meet with campaigners. And I say to her, we now need to see action. It is important to remember that the denial of contact has not just taken place in care homes, but in hospitals too. And I can account for that from personal experience. Therefore, any legislative response must address both sides of the health and social care system. I hope those on the government bench will hear this point. It is not just colleagues in this House that are pressing for action in this area. These calls have been backed by over 70 organisations from across the sector. They include MenCap, the Alzheimer's Society, Mind, Age UK, Care UK, Health Watch, the list goes on. We have cross-party support from all parties across the House. In fact, I have witnessed few other issues on which there has been such universal agreement in this House. There are only a few months left of this parliamentary session. We expect a King's Speech in the autumn and a general election next year. It is clear that the time to act is now. So will the government commit to legislating for a care supporter in the next King's Speech? Will all major parties commit to putting this legal right into their manifestos? We have a bill ready to be implemented, and I want to thank Tom Gilly from Matrix Chambers and Caroline Ott from Lead A for their hugely valuable work on this draft piece of legislation. Let me quickly outline how the bill would operate in practice. The bill would place a duty on health and care providers to allow a service user to be accompanied by a care supporter. A care supporter is defined as a person nominated as such by the service user. Importantly, the right would attach to the service user and only following their clear and informed consent. The bill places a duty on providers to allow unrestricted in-person support from at least one essential care supporter nominated by the service user. The bill also provides safeguards for those exceptional circumstances in which this duty on providers would not apply. The bill provides alternatives if the care supporter's face-to-face access is entirely excluded. The provider would then have to take reasonable steps to facilitate contact by other means. Finally, the bill would also provide means for appeal and proper enforcement, two measures that are currently almost impossible for those trying to maintain contact with their loved ones in care settings. As always, I stand ready to work with government on any steps that can be taken to make this bill as effective as possible. Mr. Speaker, no one in this House was left untouched from the trauma of the coronavirus pandemic. I think that we can all agree on the principle that whether it is the state or a privately run care home or a hospital, it does not have the right to separate us from our family and loved ones. We must now take this opportunity to learn from this trauma and bring in legislation.
That the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. The question is that the honourable member have leave to bring in the bill. As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Who will prepare to bring in the bill?
Tracy Crouch, Daisy Cooper, Liz Saville-Roberts, Marcia de Cordova, Caroline Lucas, Alicia Cairns, Hilary Benn, Maria Regal, John Nicholson, Caroline Dinage and Steve Bryan. And myself.
Well done. Dan Carden.
That suit would go nice with a pair of black shoes.
Thank you. Care Supporters Bill.
Second reading what day?
Friday the 24th of November.
Friday the 24th of November. Not done that. Okay. Right, we now come to motion number 2 on the Committee on Standards.